All right, so welcome to the show today. Closers are losers. Don't be a loser. All right, so I am the founder and chairman of Seventh Level here with our CEO, Matt Ryder, and we are a company that helps sales professionals, coaches, sales managers, executives, business owners, probably like you listening, transform the way they sell, the way they communicate by learning how to use human behavior to your advantage, learning specific skilled questions, work with human behavior rather than against it. We'll talk about that in the show. These are called neuro-emotional persuasion questions with the right tonality. Put your prospects at ease, because everybody wants that. Eliminate sales pressure that allows your prospects to want to engage. And we help you get them to persuade and sell themselves. Matt, how are you today?
Yeah, good, Jeremy. Excellent. Today's going to be going.
Mr. Aussie all the way out in Sydney, the big Chicago Bulls fan. I hate to tell you, bro, but the Bulls suck. Like, I think, I don't know, maybe you thought that like,
I'm out of
like
here.
Michael Jordan days, you know what I mean? Like, but
96.
you know, the last 20 years,
96.
The last 20 years, they have not been that good. So
I'm still riding that high from the Jazz series.
Dude, something, man. I used to be a Jazz fan as a kid, you know, like I remember watching that game, like having my heart broke by Michael Jordan, you know?
Doing these ones.
All right. So let's get in it today. Sydney, I'm out in Arizona. We're just hanging out here today. Nice warm weather in the winter, 65 freaking degrees. So we're about to go back to Missouri here in about 2 weeks. So we're dreading the winter cold.
I don't know how you do it, man. I don't know how you do it. You know, like such a tough life slugging in between houses. You know, I heard that one of your kids had to go coach the other day, but I mean, it could be a rumor. I don't even know.
They did have, you know, I actually make my kids fly coach while we fly first class. I don't actually let any of my kids, except our 2-year-old, she's the beauty queen, fly because we have to be there, fly first class. I'm no joke. Like our 2-year-old has a first class seat. So I don't know. It's a whole nother story, but you can't, after they turn 2 in the United States, they have to sit in their own seats. So I'm like, I got to buy my 2-year-old a freaking first class seat because my wife wants to sit in first class. All my other kids are in coach. Cause I'm like, you got to earn money. You got to learn skills before you have the privilege of sitting in first class. Like, it's just not going to be handed to you, dude.
That's very true, which is a good segue because today what we're going to do is learn the skill. And I want to get Jeremy's thoughts on the difference between, like, I don't want to say B2B and B2C because I think the lines of that have become very blurred these days. But I want to say more individual sales versus corporate sales and sort of some of the different tacks that you take because obviously I've been doing individual sales for a long time and now you and myself and Marco are learning. And I think we locked up like an $80,000 deal the other day, which is good fun. So learning the difference in the nuances, and I suppose, you know, a lot of people say, oh, in my industry, it's different. And, you know, it's this and this. And I tend to think that like communication is communication, regardless of what context it's in. But there are a few process-driven differences. So in terms of like, you know, like just as an overall thought, like what do you think are sort of some of the core tenets of, I would say, you know, individual versus corporate sales?
Well, one thing we have to understand, if you're transitioning from individual sales where you're selling like insurance or financial services or cars or whatever it is, like real estate, and you're just selling one-to-one, you have to understand in the B2B world, you're actually selling one-to-many. You know, you have a lot of people that sell from stage and they always talk about, hey, we have to learn how to sell one-to-many. Well, in B2B, it's pretty much the same thing unless you're talking to a mom and pop store that has one owner and 2 employees. Okay. So if you're selling to corporations, if you're selling to, let's say, you know, Fortune 1000 companies or 500 companies or, you know, Fortune 100 companies or anything like that, you have to understand that the average company has 6.8 decision makers. That's not even people who influence the sale. There could be 4 or 5 more people that actually influence that sale. Because let's say that you sold some type of, you know, SaaS product, you know, some type of computer system or something. Well, besides the CEO or maybe the senior vice president of technology, the CTO or whatever, there might be influencers in that account that you have to get on board. Let's say the people that implement the new software in that company? What if they down your software because they feel like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so hard to implement. It's going to be so hard to train our people. Well, now they're going to have a negative influence on everybody else you're talking to and trying to sell to. So you have to understand in B2B, you're selling one to many, not one to one. That's what a lot of people don't understand. They think like, oh, I've identified the decision maker, but they're not really the decision maker. There's probably 6 other people also deciding that you have to learn how to influence from your questioning skills.
So it's sort of like, there's a whole thing in like creating advocates and then sort of working the way up the chain and going to the process. Okay. Actually, this is a good, interesting sidebar. How much do you think is translatable if someone, a lot of the guys that we speak to that we train are in the sort of like more individual selling space. How much do you think is really translatable from stage selling to that? Do you think there's much of a transference of skill between stage and say phone sales or Zoom sales?
Yeah, stage selling is much different because you're not able to ask a ton of questions on stage. You will ask quite a few questions to get people to think. But because you have such a small window and you have so much to cover, stage selling is more like seeding. It's more like seeding certain things in the presentation that help them overcome their objections. Because even if I'm selling B2B and I'm in the room with 6 decision makers, well, I can help overcome their concerns. But if I'm on stage and there's 2,000 people in the audience, I can't overcome individual objections and concerns. So on stage in your presentation, you almost have to put in, like, for example, I'll be like, I know for sales training, like one objection people have is like, I don't have the time to learn new skills. Like I'm so busy in my job, I don't have enough time to learn. So what I do in my stage presentations is I put like client testimonials where they have the same concern. And I'll say like, I was at an event last year and I talked to this guy came up to me after the event and said, Jeremy, I really want to get your sales training program, but I'm so busy. Like I've got a family, I'm working 40 hours a week. I don't have time to learn the skills. I don't have the time to learn how to do this. And all I said is, yeah, that's not a problem. And I got busy. And then lo and behold, the same guy was came up to me in an event 3 months later. And I said, how's it coming for you? How are your sales increased, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no. And I said, okay, so in the last 3 months, because you didn't dedicate, let's say, even 20 minutes a day to learning new skills, how much money do you think you lost? And he just sat there and he's like, oh my gosh, I probably lost like $5,000 a month. So the question is, do you want to keep losing $5,000 every single month because you haven't taken the time to learn new advanced skills? And another one you can do, and I did this in another presentation that actually worked a little bit better now that I'm kind of remembering in this. And this guy came up to me and said, I don't have the time. I don't use blah, 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 blah. And I said, hey, I wanted to ask you, what do you actually sell? And he's like, oh, I sell for this computer-based program. I was like, interesting. How long is your daily commute into work? He's like, oh, it's about 30 minutes each way. I said, interesting. And what do you listen to in the car when you drive to and from work? He's like, well, I listen to my favorite songs and I listen to the news and I like to get updated with politics. I'm like, interesting. How much of those Britney Spears songs or CNN news, how much money is that making you every month? And he looked at me, he's like, sounds like I've got at least an hour today to learn those new skills. And he got into the program. 2 months later, posted a testimonial, his sales increased by over 100%. So you have to seed that with client testimonials that have the same concerns. And so that helps your audience not have that concern. So that's a difference between selling from stage and one-on-one for sure.
So it's sort of like more nuanced, but can sort of be a bit more obvious with how you go about things because you are talking to so many people. Whereas if you took a very obvious approach like that, when it's more of a one-on-one conversation, it probably induces a bit of sales resistance because it's just like, all right, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah, it does. Because if you're one-on-one or even 1 to 4 or 5 in a boardroom meeting, you can help resolve their concerns by just being there and clarifying and probing. But with the audience of 2,000, you can't go to all 2,000 and clarify and probe. You have to like put these little seedings into your presentation that help them not even have that concern by the end.
I suppose the metrics are different too, because if you were to get 200 of those people to buy, that's a huge win. But if I got 10% of people who talk to me to buy, I would fire myself.
A huge loss.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're in the speaking industry and you have 10% to buy, that's pretty decent. If you have 30% that buy, you're like the best, since sliced bread, but it's because you can't help them overcome their concerns one-on-one.
Yeah.
You've got to see things and then put little nuances in there that really help them not even have the concern. So throughout the presentation, you're seeding that. So by the end, when you bring up price, they don't have that objection because it's already been kind of wiped out of their mind.
Yeah, I've just seen the reason why I came out is I've seen a lot of people recently, especially in some of the trainings that we're doing. They've posted up things that they're saying and they're doing. And I was just like, I don't know, like, where are you hearing that? And then I'm like, oh, okay, it's coming from a stage seller. And I'm like, okay, it's just a totally different, I've never sold from stage. I'm sure I would like to learn the skill one day, but I would never teach someone how to sell from stage. I'm a pure phone sales guy or face-to-face. That's all I've ever done. And the skill sets just seem very different. But in terms of
it is quite a bit different for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, what do you think are some of the, like what are some good resources that people can get to? Like, because obviously the money that you can get when you transition from selling the individual to selling corporate is much, much bigger. I think the deals take longer it requires a bit more nuance, potentially a bit more skill, but I think the process is there, but the outcomes are obviously can be much better. Like, what are some good resources that were like, if you were like, okay, if you want to start getting into this realm, like where would you start?
Well, there's some excellent books. The book that Jerry Acuff and our company is writing right now is going to talk a lot about the B2B sale as well, B2C and B2B. So really, when you get into B2B, you have to learn how to navigate throughout the organization. You have to learn how to navigate. You have to learn how to get to the real decision makers and the influencers. The same NEPQ questions apply to B2B, almost identical. There are a few variances, maybe 5% different, but you have to learn how to navigate throughout the organization. You have to learn how companies work, their processing and their budgeting and their quarter budgeting and just different things like that. One good question is, John, can you walk me through your company's decision-making process just so I understand? Can you walk me through your company's decision-making process? Not who's the decision maker? Because that sounds awkward and weird, right?
Yeah.
So it's little questions like that you have to ask in that conversation that allow you to kind of visually see who's really running this business, not just the person that called you wanting more details, because it could be completely different. They might not be able to make the decision at all. So there's some references we can, there's a good friend of mine named Mark Wayshak that really focuses on B2B sales. He's got a good book out there that talk about how to, slice through an organization and stuff. And I still learn myself as well, even though I've been in B2B and sold B2C in both. I kind of understand both like the back of my hand, but I'm still learning as well. So he's got some excellent resources out there on just strictly just navigating through organizations.
There's one that you told Marco to buy, which was Mastering the Complex Sale. That one seemed to be fairly helpful as well. Actually, I don't think I told you, one of our NEPQ clients who I did a little bit of help with on the side, a guy named Alex, he actually he joined up to learn how to create some corporate advocates, which is like those influencers, you know what I mean? And he actually ended up getting like a $25 million deal with the Westfield Group, which is a huge group over here, simply because he used NEPQ on that influencer. That influencer then became an enormous advocate who then pushed, because although that person didn't get any financial payoff, he'd figured out that that person could pretty much set themselves up for a promotion by being the person who saved the company money, time, and resources by introducing this person. So, and
that's where there's a little bit of a difference in B2B, because when you get these influencers, you get them, it's almost, you NEPQ them is what we call. So they're so on board with you, but then you have to almost train them on what questions to ask the CEO or the person really writing the check. So it's almost like you're training the influencers to influence to get you into like the board, the chairman, the CFO, the COO, the CEO, the ones that really make those decisions. And so it's almost like you have to train them how to properly sell. And then you have to find out what's behind their why, because most of the time it's not financial. They're not going to make any money off doing this deal. But like you said, certain questions you ask that we teach you in the course, sales training course, NEPQ 3.0, basically help you understand why they would even want to do that. Like what's behind them even wanting to make that introduction. Could be a promotion, could be better stock options, could be an incentive there that might not necessarily be like, oh, you just received 25% more money this month. That's not going to be the case in corporate America.
There's a huge hole in a lot of these industries, because like a lot of these industries is just people suck at selling, like, the building industry, and there's all these, and so like the same guy, the same client, Alex, he's a great dude. He's actually an old army buddy of mine, and he signed up for NEPQ through me. And then I gave him a little bit of help because he's an old friend of mine. And he ended up going to Antler. Do you know who Antler is? They're a big like private investment. So they basically take on like businesses and they give them like equity. So like they fund them. So he had to go through a funding process, and you get, it's like 15,000, 125,000, and like 5 million, I think, or like the stages over a 3-year period. If you hit targets, you get that level of investment for X percentage of the company, but then they provide you with all this infrastructure and help and stuff like that. So he went in there and like pitched his investment, right? But he did it with an NEPQ style, and we worked on it together. And people were just like, what is this? Because everyone's like, yes, we're going to provide this for this and this for this, and we're going to disrupt the marketplace. And he just went in it with a totally different mentality, and he got all the funding pretty much straight away locked up. And then he secured all these deals because he's in an industry where no one sells. Everyone just tells. No one actually.
I'd love to see, that the show over here in the United States, Shark Tank, Dave and John, all those guys. I don't know if you have that over there, but they always come in there and they pitch, and like Mark Cuban and all the sharks are just like, it's like, I'd love to see somebody that learns NEPQ go in there, and they would be like, what? Like so different, right? Because they're so used to getting pitched that they're almost like walls are up. But I'd love to see an NEPQer come in there and see what would happen.
Just love to know what you guys are looking for in an investment opportunity. Yeah.
Right. You're asking them questions to find problems they have with maybe some of their investments and how you can solve that with yours.
Yeah, exactly. It'd really mess it up. It'd be fun.
That would be interesting TV for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's actually funny. James said the other day, we should find some people, figure out, find a producer, and then try and coach one of the guys on there. There's a sales training organization in Australia called ISR. That went on to Australia's version of Shark Tank and did a pretty good job. And now they got a fair bit of investment, and they definitely spending a lot of money on ads. I don't particularly think their sales methodology is anything.
Is good.
It's not bad. It's just nothing special. There's nothing particularly. It's not like I think one of the cruxes, we have a founder in you that is just an incredibly successful salesperson. So it's like, the methodology clearly works across multiple industries and strategies. So it's just like, it's a no-brainer because, I'll speak to some of the guys in the course, and they're like, I don't want to turn this into like a pitch fest, but, and a guy door knocking, making 80 grand a month, and having to tell me he has to park around the corner because he's driving a damn Maserati, but he doesn't want to pull up to people's neighborhoods in a Maserati because he's door knocking. Like, it puts off the wrong image. So it's just funny that some of the problems that people have when they actually know how to communicate effectively.
It's so true. When I was in sales, my first job was door-to-door sales, and my last year there, which was like my fifth year in sales. I mean, I was like 25 or whatever, but I was making like, $700,000 a year as a 25-year-old. But like when I would go out and door knock, I drove like this old beat up used Honda because I didn't want to come across like, because I had a really nice BMW, which I was like, oh, BMW, I was 25. I thought I was like Donald Trump. But I would drive this beat up Honda that was like 10 years old to go out and door knock because I'm like, man, I don't want people thinking like I'm some rich dude like knocking on doors. Little did they know that I was probably making 5 times more than they were. And these were really rich executives, And I was a door-to-door salesman, was probably making more money than the CEOs of their companies.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I went into a thing, there's a salary calculator in Australia for different salaries. And the average salary for CEO is $337,000 a year in Australia.
Yeah.
And that's including all the bonuses and benefits. And I was like, that's decent money. I said, don't get me wrong, but we've got dudes doing that, every quarter.
Yeah, so. We got phone sales guys that make more than that.
Yeah, it's selling, $15,000 products. It's great. It's great. You know what I mean? What do you think was, I got asked this today. What was the, we've all heard the story of the Tony Robbins and all that kind of stuff. But like, was there a particular moment where you switched over and like, this is what, I was on a sales call yesterday with Marco, and Marco he's in the matrix.
Yeah.
Right. Like he's seeing the green and black. He's seeing the ones and zeros. You know what I mean? And I think there's a particular time in sales when you go, oh yeah, I've got this. Like you figure it out and you go, oh yeah. And all of a sudden everything goes everything goes clear and you're like, yep.
Everything slows down. It's like you're the NFL quarterback and like people are rushing by you and the game just slows down and you know exactly what to do.
And that happened for me, I would say probably 4 or 5 months into training with you.
Yeah.
And I went from like the 25,000 a month to like 80. And it was just like that straight. And I was like, yep, I got this. And I was like, as soon as after I had a few sessions with you, I was like, oh, I get what he's doing here. And then all of a sudden I was like, I just started to see everything differently. What do you think? Like, do you have a distinct memory of like when you're like, oh, that's how people think?
Yeah, it took me a while because I'm the one that, you know, kind of by trial and error invented NEPQ, right? So you guys have the clean, polished version when we train our clients now and when you were a client, you know, a couple of years ago. So I would say it took me a few years, you know, like even that first summer I made like in 4 months, like when I was knocking home security, I made like 150,000 in 4 months. So that's like 35 grand a month. And I was 21, I think then. I still did not have that down.
I would have wasted that money.
I don't even
ruined that money.
Where did all that money go? I'm like, I think I started really saving and investing money like when I was 30 or 31, but from 21 to 30, like, I'm not sure where all that money went. Like, I don't even, like, I remember bragging as a newfound married guy. I was like, yeah, we don't even have to budget. Like we just spend on whatever we want. And I'm like, man, that was really stupid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'd be retired by now. But anyway, so it took me a couple years to really get it down, but I would say even almost 12 years before I had the polished version that you have now. Like even in 2008, that was the first year I made over $1 million in commissions. I was selling like debt relief services. I made like 1.3 million in commissions. And that was when everybody was like, you know, like salespeople were losing their jobs. Like
2008, that was the year, man. That was the worst year in like, I think in economic history. Yeah.
Oh, everybody was losing their jobs in my industry as well. Like people were losing their jobs, incomes going in half. Like, you know, they were leaving in droves. And like my income the year before was like 790 and then it bounced up to 1.3. I just made quantum leaps, but I would say it took me almost till about 2012 because, you know, I was in college, studied behavioral science, human psychology, but I kept learning, kept studying. Like I'm an avid learner. Even today now, like every morning I come in 45 minutes, it's on my to-do list. I'm reading a new book about human psychology, you know, something about persuasion, something, right? And some of it is pure garbage that I read. I'm like, yeah, this is not going to work at all. It's so old school, but I get a few good ideas and then I reshape them and, you know, put them in our training to help people. So I would say it wasn't until like 2012 that it really got in my mind where I'm like full bore. I know exactly what I'm doing. I can do this in any space because it takes a while before you feel like you can do it in anything you sell. Like you might get it for your industry, but then if you went to a different industry, it's like you're starting over. You see so many salespeople that do well in one industry, they go into something else and they just struggle. Because they don't understand the psychology behind human behavior.
You know, Marco sold a solar deal for one of the clients so they could make the first payment. You know,
he did.
Yeah. So the guy wanted to buy an EPQ 3.0. He didn't have the cash because he wasn't a very effective salesperson. So Marco goes, "When's your next deal?" And he goes, "Tomorrow." And he goes, "All right, cool. How much is it for? How much comms will you make?" He goes, "If I make the sale for you, you can have all the comms and you pay us." He goes, "Okay." Solar. Marco never
sold it.
Never seen a solar unit, I would say. He lives, you know what I mean? He lives in an apartment in Melbourne. Anyway, sold the $15,000 solar package.
Yeah.
Paid like there, which never happens in solar. It's always contracts. No, he made him put like $5,000 down. Like, it was ridiculous.
And that's a difference, right? So Marco is like seeing, like he's in the matrix, right? So he's seeing it, right? So he understands human behavior and why people buy. So Marco can go sell solar today and be the number one guy in the company. But then next month, like, you know what, I'm going to sell real estate and within a month be the top real estate person because it doesn't matter. When you get to that level, you can go sell anything. Doesn't matter because you just learn what problems do the prospect have. Here's how my solution solves those. And you just wrap your questions around that. And that's all you do. It's easy. It's just like that step-by-step structure that we teach. That's why our training is duplicatable in any industry. You see some sales training companies that they'll do decent in insurance, but then they go over and train car salespeople and nobody can sell anything. Their sales go backwards. Or, you know, some that can train in real estate, but they would, if they went over and trained in financial services, they would just suck. With us, we get we get record results really with any industry that we train because of the duplicatable step-by-step structure in those questions.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And it's fun to watch people when they make the leap and they start figuring it out and you're like, oh, you see it too.
Oh, you see it for sure, because I'll tell you, like, I finally got it. I know what you're talking about now. And sometimes sometimes people pick that up in a couple of weeks, sometimes a couple months, sometimes 4 or 5 months. But once they get it, it's like they're just like a machine at that point. They never look back.
Yeah. I mean, the way that I used to sell was no good. People were like, oh, you must have like some sort of natural aptitude to selling. I don't really think I do at all. I think I'm witty. That's about it. I don't know if that makes you good at sales or not, but I can definitely like talk with people and I'm fine with that. But when I started sales, I sucked. I was terrible. And then I was forced in a situation where I had to become somewhat good at it because I enjoyed eating. That was really, and then I was selling $97 fitness programs for, $18 commission. I was doing that for like 10 years. I remember the first high ticket closing gig that I got was because it was from one of the fit marketing companies that was doing the marketing for the gyms that I was selling. They're like, oh, what are you doing? So they were like, yeah, sweet, $7,500 program. They go, how much comms do you want? And I was like, $300. And they were like, we'll pay you 400. And I was like, you idiots. I was like, I'd call James. I was like, these morons are going to pay me $400 to make a sale. And I went 15 for my first 16 calls. Just because just a pure objection handling skills from fitness. And then went to a business coaching guy. And then it was like, he wanted a guy to do business coaching sales. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm the greatest ever. I've done that my whole life. Never done it once in my whole life. And anyway, did that, made $12,000 in commissions the first week. And I was like, oh, this is something good. And then I just hit that 25 capped out, couldn't get any more because I had such a huge no-show rate to sales calls. And that's when I saw your training with Eli and Sales Resistance, reached out to you or NEPQ. And then I started messaging you direct on Facebook. And then you pretty much sold me over Facebook.
I think I just asked you a few questions.
Yeah, you just kept asking questions. And I was so intrigued. I was like,
those pesky questions.
It was it was all over voice. Okay, just so I can see the rationale. And I was like, and I never heard them before. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, this is what. And I just effortlessly went through the process. And then, you got me on a call and it was like a 15-minute call. And you're like, these are your 3 options. And I was like, I'll get the big one.
That was one of my last sales calls I ever did.
Yeah.
For my own company.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I don't think I'd ever done a call for my own company, but I'm like, yeah, let's get on and see if I still got the juice, I guess,
Yeah. It was a good thing you did. And then I think it was like 10 months later, I took over the company.
Yeah, I know. See,
who sold who? Who sold who?
I know who sold who, right? Yeah. Now you're the CEO running the whole show, man. No, I love it. We're a good combo. It's good.
Yeah, it's good fun. All right, well, we'll sort of cut it here. I think we got some good information. There's a few tangents, but I think one of the points of this podcast is not only of this version of the podcast, because we have the interviews and then we have this one, is sort of I guess to sort of just a bit more chat, a bit more candor, and sort of learn about you a bit more, and then get some gold nuggets here and there. So if you guys like what you heard, make sure you go to the Facebook group, Sales Revolution. Make sure you like, subscribe to the podcast, head over to the YouTube channel, Jeremy Miner, have a look at some of the content there. We are going to be starting to post a bit more content on there. Yeah. But other than that,
just go to Sales Revolution. We go live in the Sales Revolution about 4 times a week with different trainings, Q&As, actually, no, 5 times a week, because we have one of our sales training directors, Jimmy, in there doing a live every week as well. We've got you doing a live. We've got me doing 3 lives. So about 5 times a week now. So come to learn how to make more sales. That's why we created Sales Revolution, and it's growing very rapidly. We just started it 4 months ago. There's almost 2,500 people in there, and we really haven't even marketed it yet. So growing very rapidly. So get in there and start learning how to make more sales. I mean, you're going to work the same amount of hours every day. Why not sell more? I don't know.
Exactly. Who knows? All right, guys. Thanks very much. Hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we will see you guys soon.
Now, if you're serious about joining the top 1%, I mean the top 1%, and you want to experience more training content just like this, click the links right over there. right over there. They're exactly what you need to see next. You see, I release new episodes featuring top salespeople and sales authorities, multiple six-figure, high six-figure, even seven-figure earners. And if you're new here, do yourself a favor and smash that subscribe button right below, and join our new Facebook group, Sales Revolution. You see, it's free, and there's a link in the description below just for you. We put it there for you. Finally, I make posts on Facebook and Instagram each and every day with more tips and training. So be sure and follow me and turn on your notifications. So make a comment in the first 7 minutes to any of my latest posts, share this episode, and there's a very real chance that you're gonna win some killer prizes. And here's the thing, don't sit on the sidelines. Don't be like everyone else. Get into the game. Join the sales revolution. Stay active, get involved, learn the right skills, and we will show you how to take your life and income to a level that most only dream about.